She went in to clean and saw a baby crawling toward the balcony, and no one else was home. Hey there, welcome back to the channel. I'm so glad you're joining us today. So, picture this. You're just doing your usual cleaning job, minding your business, when suddenly out of nowhere you see a baby crawling toward an open balcony. And the crazy part? No one else is home. Sounds a little like a thriller, right? Well, trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Before we dive into today's wild story, if you're enjoying the content, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and of course hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We'd love for you to join the Stories TH family for more heart-stopping stories. And hey, drop a comment below telling us where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your neck of the woods. Let's get some fun interactions going. All right, take a deep breath, relax, and get ready for a story that's sure to keep you on the edge of your seat. Grab your popcorn and let's jump right into it. Stepping into luxury. Maria's heart raced as she walked up the grand steps of the mansion. The large iron gates creaked behind her, closing slowly, and she felt the weight of the moment settle over her. It was her first time working for the Wilson family, a name synonymous with wealth, fame, and power in the city. This was the kind of opportunity that could change everything. She was just a house cleaner, but today she had been entrusted with cleaning their magnificent estate, the kind of estate where marble floors and crystal chandeliers gleamed in every corner, the kind of house that could make anyone feel like they didn't belong. She couldn't help but feel a little out of place. The grand entrance, with its towering pillars and polished floors, looked like something out of a movie. She felt like a character in a film, stepping into a world that was entirely foreign to her. The scent of fresh roses filled the air as she walked past the pristine garden, with perfectly trimmed hedges and fountains that sparkled in the morning sun. As she walked through the house, Maria's eyes couldn't help but linger on the expensive artwork adorning the walls. She tried not to gawk at the intricacies of the furniture, the hand-carved wood, and the gleaming gold accents. Everything screamed luxury. She had never seen anything like it before, and for a moment, she wondered how people could live like this. The house was eerily silent, which made Maria feel even more alone. It was a silence that seemed almost too perfect, too planned. There was no hustle and bustle, no sound of children playing or people going about their day. It was as if the house had been abandoned, left to stand in its glory, untouched. Maria shivered slightly, brushing off the feeling, as she continued down the hallway. She had a job to do, and she was determined to do it well. She entered the massive living room, where a grand piano sat beneath the large windows. The light streamed in, casting long shadows across the room. Maria set her cleaning supplies on the table and looked around. There was something almost intimidating about the space. The high ceilings, the luxurious furniture, it all felt so cold, so distant from the world she knew. Her thoughts drifted back to her own life. She had grown up in a small apartment in the city, the kind of place where the plumbing barely worked and the neighbors argued every night. Her parents, though loving, had never been able to give her the kind of life she dreamed of. They had always told her that hard work was the key to everything, that if she worked hard enough, she could escape the cycle of poverty. But here she was, in a mansion where money didn't just buy comfort, it bought a completely different reality. She sighed, shaking off the melancholy thoughts. She wasn't here to feel sorry for herself. She was here to clean, and she was going to do it as best as she could. As she began wiping down the countertops, she tried to push the discomfort aside, focusing on the task at hand. But it wasn't long before something caught her eye. From the corner of her eye, Maria saw a small figure moving across the floor. At first, she thought it was a pet, perhaps a cat or a dog, but when she turned to look, she froze. It wasn't an animal. It was a baby, no more than a year old, crawling towards the open balcony doors. Maria's breath hitched in her throat. The child was dangerously close to the edge of the balcony, and Maria couldn't see anyone else around. She quickly glanced around the room, expecting someone to come rushing in to stop the child, but the house remained eerily quiet. The baby seemed oblivious to the danger. its tiny hands pushing against the marble floor as it crawled toward the balcony. Maria's heart pounded in her chest, and a wave of panic washed over her. She had no idea where the parents were or why this child was alone. She had been told that the Wilsons would be out for the day, but surely they would have someone else here with the baby. Her mind raced. What should she do? Should she run after the baby, or should she call for help? But what if she was too late? What if the baby got too close to the edge? The thought of something happening to that child filled her with dread. Maria wasn't sure she could live with herself if something went wrong. She took a step forward, her heart hammering in her chest, but then paused. The balcony was only a few feet away now, and she was still unsure if she could reach the baby in time. The house felt impossibly large, and the distance between her and the child seemed to stretch with every second. "Come on, Maria, think," she scolded herself. She wasn't going to let anything happen to this baby. She had to act, and she had to act fast. In a panic, she rushed toward the baby, her feet slapping against the marble floor. She reached out just as the baby reached the edge of the balcony. Her hand closed around the tiny wrist, pulling the child back toward her. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The baby looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes, oblivious to the danger it had been in. Maria's breath came in short gasps as she hugged the baby to her chest, her heart still racing. She couldn't believe what had just happened. She had saved the child. But where were the parents? Where was everyone? Her mind spun with questions. She couldn't just leave the child here alone. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. Maria looked around the room again, but it was still empty. No one had come. No one had even heard the baby. For a moment, Maria felt a wave of confusion and fear wash over her. What kind of family left a baby alone in a house like this? She looked at the baby in her arms, who now seemed content, cooing softly as she held it close. "Where are your parents?" Maria whispered, though she knew the baby couldn't answer. She stood there for a moment, trying to gather her thoughts. The silence of the mansion was deafening, and Maria felt a shiver run down her spine. Something wasn't right. Searching for answers. Maria stood frozen, the baby still cradled in her arms, its tiny fingers gripping her shirt. The silence around her seemed to press down on her chest like a weight she couldn't escape. She scanned the room again, almost desperately now, her eyes landing on the empty doorways, the untouched furniture. The house seemed so large, too large to feel so empty. She hadn't heard a single sound since entering. No footsteps, no voices, not even the soft hum of a distant conversation. It was as if the house had swallowed everyone whole, leaving her alone with the child. She glanced back at the baby, still looking up at her with wide, innocent eyes. It was impossible for Maria to wrap her mind around the situation. A house like this, worth millions, with state-of-the-art security systems and staff at every turn, and yet, here she was, alone with a baby on the verge of danger. This wasn't just a housekeeping job anymore. This was something deeper, something unsettling. She couldn't stay here with the baby much longer. The Wilsons, at least, that's who she assumed the family must be, wouldn't be pleased if they came home to find their child in the hands of a stranger. But then again, what if something had happened to them? What if there was more going on than she could see? A cold shiver ran down Maria's spine as the thought hit her like a punch. What if this wasn't just an ordinary family? What if the Wilsons were hiding something? The thought seemed far-fetched, but the more she considered it, the more it made sense. There were too many unanswered questions, too many strange things about the way this house felt, like a beautiful shell hiding some deep, dark secret. The more she thought about it, the more uncomfortable she felt. The baby, cooing softly in her arms, seemed oblivious to the tension in the air. Maria looked down at the child, trying to steady her breath. "I have to find out what's going on," she muttered, almost to herself. She gently set the baby down on the plush couch nearby, taking a moment to steady herself. The child was safe for now, but Maria couldn't ignore the sense of dread that had begun to settle in her stomach. She needed answers. If she was going to stay here, if she was going to continue working in this house, she needed to understand what was happening. With a deep breath, she walked toward the hallway, her footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The house seemed even quieter now, the silence pressing down harder with every step. She passed by the gleaming stairway and the grand kitchen, its stainless steel appliances practically gleaming with freshness. But nothing, absolutely nothing, seemed to have any warmth. Her eyes caught a small door near the back of the house. It was a discreet door, nothing too fancy. It stood apart from the rest of the house, as if it didn't quite belong. The thought of entering the room made Maria's heart beat faster. Something about it felt wrong, but it also felt necessary. She needed to know what was behind that door. She approached it hesitantly, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for the doorknob. The cool metal sent a shiver through her fingertips, but she twisted it anyway, opening the door. The air in the room was thick, musty, as though it hadn't been opened in a long time. Maria stepped inside, her heart pounding as the door creaked shut behind her. What she found inside took her breath away. The room was dark, the only light coming from a single dim light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes and files, but it wasn't the clutter that caught her attention. No, it was the photographs. There, pinned to the walls, were dozens of pictures. Some were of the Wilsons, but others were different. Pictures of people Maria didn't recognize, faces twisted in strange expressions, some blurry and dark, others clear as day. Her eyes were drawn to one in particular. It was a photo of a woman standing alone in a dimly lit room. Her face was barely visible, but there was something about her expression that sent a cold shiver up Maria's spine. The woman seemed desperate, as though she was trapped in the photograph. Maria's throat tightened. She reached out to touch the photo, her fingers hovering over it, but something made her stop. Her instincts screamed at her to leave, to get out of that room before she uncovered something she wasn't ready to know. But the pull to understand, to know what was going on, was too strong. She pulled the photo from the wall, carefully studying it. Her mind raced with questions. Who was this woman? Why was she here, among all the other photos? And what did it have to do with the Wilsons? Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, sharp and quick. Maria's heart leaped in her chest, and she hastily shoved the photo back into place, her breath coming fast. She turned to leave the room, but as she opened the door, she came face to face with someone. A man. Tall, with sharp features, his dark eyes scanning her face as if trying to gauge her every move. Maria froze, her hand still on the doorknob. "Who are you?" the man asked, his voice calm but firm. Maria's mouth went dry. She couldn't find her words at first, but she quickly composed herself. I work for the Wilsons," she stammered, trying to keep her voice steady. He didn't seem convinced. His gaze narrowed, as if he was sizing her up. Then his eyes flicked to the hallway. "The Wilsons are not home," he said, his voice low. "What are you doing in here?" Maria swallowed hard, her mind racing. She had to come up with something, but the truth wasn't going to be good enough. "I was just cleaning," she said, her voice quieter now. "I didn't mean to." The man didn't say another word. Instead, he stepped forward and Maria instinctively stepped back. His eyes were cold, calculating, as though he was trying to figure out if she was lying. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice suddenly cold and sharp. He stepped toward her, and Maria felt a chill run down her spine. The Wilsons don't take kindly to unexpected visitors. And just like that, Maria felt the weight of the situation crash down on her. She wasn't just a maid in a mansion anymore. She had stepped into something much deeper, and now she had no choice but to face whatever lay ahead. Unraveling the mystery. Maria's heart raced as the man's cold eyes lingered on her, his presence like an unspoken threat. The silence between them was thick, suffocating. She could feel every second ticking by as if it were a countdown, and the tension in the air made her skin crawl. She opened her mouth to speak, but her words caught in her throat. The man's gaze didn't waver. His piercing stare seemed to see straight through her, making her feel exposed, vulnerable. "You shouldn't be here," he repeated, his voice still calm, but with an edge of finality. His eyes flicked toward the door, almost as if he was waiting for her to make a move, to leave. His posture was confident, the way he held himself radiating authority. Maria felt small in comparison, like a speck of dust in this giant, unfamiliar world. I didn't mean to intrude, Maria stammered, her voice trembling slightly as she tried to explain. I was just cleaning. I didn't realize. The man cut her off with a sharp motion of his hand. I don't care what you think you were doing, he said, his tone now cold and calculating. The Wilsons are very particular about who they allow into their lives. You don't belong here. Maria felt a rush of heat flood her cheeks. She wasn't sure if it was from embarrassment, fear, or the raw emotion building up inside her. She wasn't some stranger. She had been hired for this job, trusted to clean this house, but now she was being treated like an outsider, an intruder. The disparity between her world and his was as clear as ever. But then something in her shifted. She wasn't going to let him dismiss her so easily. Maria squared her shoulders, meeting his gaze directly. She wasn't just going to shrink away. I'm just doing my job, she said firmly, though her voice still shook. If there's a problem with that, then we should talk to the Wilsons when they come back. The man's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a faint, amused smile. You think they'll care about a cleaning lady snooping around? He asked, the words dripping with mockery. Do you think they'll even remember your name when they come back? The Wilsons don't care about people like you. Maria's breath caught in her throat. The bitterness in his voice hit her like a slap. It was clear that he thought she was nothing more than an insignificant part of the background in this grand house. But his words, cruel as they were, only fueled something inside her. She wasn't going to let him belittle her. Not like this. Maybe they don't care, she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. But I'm here because I was hired to be, and that means I deserve respect, just like everyone else. So if you don't mind, I'd like to finish my work without being threatened. The man's expression shifted, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. For a brief moment, he seemed taken aback by her defiance. But just as quickly, the mask of indifference returned. He stepped aside, nodding once. Fine, he said coldly. Finish your work, but don't think you're free to wander wherever you please. Maria didn't say anything in response. She simply turned and walked away, her heart pounding in her chest. The encounter had left her shaken, but she wasn't about to let him see that. She focused on putting one foot in front of the other, moving swiftly back toward the main hallway. Her mind was racing with a million questions, but she knew one thing for sure. Something was wrong in this house, and she wasn't going to walk away without understanding what was going on. She found herself standing in the living room again, her hands gripping the back of the couch as she tried to steady herself. The baby, who had been so quiet during her conversation with the man, was now sitting on the floor, playing with a small toy, blissfully unaware of the tension that had just filled the air. Maria couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about all of this. The silence, the secrecy, the strange atmosphere that seemed to hang in every corner of the mansion. And now, the encounter with the man had only confirmed her suspicions. This wasn't just a wealthy family with a beautiful house. There was something deeper, something darker lurking beneath the surface. She needed to get out, to leave this place, but she couldn't bring herself to walk away just yet, not without answers. Not with the baby left alone in a house that felt so wrong. As she stood there, she heard the distant sound of a door creaking open somewhere in the house. Her heart skipped a beat. Was it the Wilsons? Had they come back? But when she turned toward the sound, her stomach dropped. It wasn't the Wilsons. It was the man, the one who had warned her, stepping into the living room, his dark eyes locking onto hers. He said nothing at first, just stood there, watching her. Then, in a low voice, he spoke. You're not the only one who's been trying to figure out what's going on here, he said, his tone unexpectedly serious. There's more to this house than you think. Maria froze, her pulse quickening. Had he just admitted to something? Was he involved in whatever mystery was unraveling here? "What do you mean?" she asked, unable to hide the curiosity in her voice. The man took a step closer, his eyes scanning the room as if making sure no one was listening. "I've seen things here," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Things that don't add up. There are secrets in this house, secrets that no one is supposed to know." Maria's breath caught in her throat. What kind of secrets? But before he could answer, the sound of a car engine rumbled in the distance, growing louder. It was the unmistakable sound of a luxury car pulling into the driveway. The man's eyes flicked toward the door, his expression darkening. "Now is not the time," he said, his voice filled with warning. "If you want answers, you need to leave now. Trust me." Maria stood there, her mind whirling. The man's words hung in the air, unanswered. She wasn't sure what he meant, but she knew one thing for certain. She had just stumbled into something much bigger than she could have ever imagined. The unexpected return. Maria felt the weight of the man's warning echo in her chest, and for a split second, the world around her seemed to slow down. His words hung in the air like a threat, a warning she couldn't ignore. There are secrets in this house, secrets that no one is supposed to know. The mere thought of it made her stomach churn with unease. But before she could process what he had said, the sound of the engine grew louder, closer now. The man's gaze shifted to the door, his body tensing slightly. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, as if preparing for something. He looked at Maria with a sharp intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that made Maria feel like she was caught in a game she didn't fully understand. "You need to leave," he repeated, his voice more urgent now. "Now." Maria hesitated, her mind racing. Was he warning her for her safety? Or was there something else going on that she wasn't seeing? Part of her wanted to listen, to leave before she became too involved in whatever secrets this house held. But the other part of her, the part that had already been drawn into the mystery, wasn't ready to walk away. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling but determined. "What's really going on here?" The man didn't answer immediately. His eyes darted to the front door as the engine noise grew louder, now unmistakably close. He stepped closer to her, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You don't want to know the answer to that," he said, his breath hot against her ear. "The people who live here, if you stay too long, you'll find yourself caught in something you'll never be able to escape." Maria's heart hammered in her chest. She wasn't sure whether to trust him or run, but the adrenaline surging through her veins was impossible to ignore. The house felt like a maze of secrets, each room hiding something darker than the last, and now it seemed as if she had stumbled into the heart of it all. The sound of tires screeching against the gravel outside snapped her from her thoughts. The front door flew open with a sudden gust of wind, and the man's face immediately shifted into something more guarded. He stepped back, putting some distance between them, but his eyes never left hers. "You can't stay here," he said again, his voice cold and detached, as though he was already preparing for something much worse. "You don't know what they're capable of." Maria turned toward the door, her heart racing as she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Someone was coming into the house, but she couldn't tell who it was yet. The man's warning still lingered in her mind, but now she had to make a decision. She could walk away, leave the house, and pretend like she hadn't seen anything. Or she could stay and get answers, risking whatever consequences might follow. Before she could make up her mind, a voice rang out from the hallway. "Who's there?" Maria spun around, her breath catching in her throat. The voice was calm but firm, so familiar. It was Alex, the man she had met years ago, the one who had once shown her the world of luxury and wealth. The man who had taken her to expensive dinners and shown her the life she'd only ever dreamed of. The man who had disappeared from her life without a word, leaving her with more questions than answers. Her pulse quickened as he stepped into the room, his eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, everything stopped. The man who had been warning her, the baby, the secrets, it all melted away, and Maria was left with only the sound of her own breathing. "Maria?" Alex's voice was soft, almost a whisper, as if he wasn't sure she was real. He looked at her with a mixture of surprise and something else, something she couldn't quite place. Maria's mouth went dry. She didn't know what to say. She hadn't expected to see him, not here, not like this. His presence only added to the confusion swirling in her mind. What was he doing here? And why was he here now, when everything had already started to unravel? Alex's eyes flicked over to the man who had warned Maria, the one who was still standing in the corner, watching them both. The tension in the room doubled, and Maria could feel the walls closing in around her. There was something unspoken between the two men, a history she didn't understand. Alex didn't look pleased to see him, but he didn't seem particularly surprised either. "Is everything all right?" Alex asked, his eyes now scanning Maria with concern. "You're looking a little shaken." Maria swallowed hard, trying to calm the racing thoughts in her mind. She wanted to ask him so many questions. What was he doing here? What had he been hiding? And why had he disappeared from her life so suddenly all those years ago? But before she could ask anything, the man in the corner spoke, his voice low and cautious. "Now is not the time," he said, his words laced with warning. "You have no idea what's really going on here. You're in over your head." Alex's eyes narrowed at the man, and for the first time, there was a flash of something fierce in his gaze. "I think it's time for you to leave," he said, his tone cold, every word like ice. The man didn't argue. He gave Maria one last, lingering look, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite understand. Concern, maybe? Or something darker? He then turned and walked toward the door, leaving the room without a word. Maria was left standing there, her body trembling with a mix of emotions. The air in the room felt heavy, and the tension from the confrontation lingered like a storm cloud waiting to burst. Alex finally turned back to Maria, his expression softening. "I didn't expect to find you here," he said, his voice gentler now, though there was still something guarded about him. He stepped closer to her, and she could feel the heat of his presence, the familiarity of it. "I never thought we'd meet like this again." Maria felt a surge of emotions flood her all at once. Seeing Alex again brought back so many memories. Memories of a life she had once dreamed of a love that never fully bloomed. She wanted to ask him everything, to demand answers about why he had disappeared from her life so suddenly. But there was something about the way he looked at her, something unreadable, that made her hesitate. "Alex," she whispered, her voice shaking. "What's going on here? What's really happening?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. He just stood there, his eyes fixed on her with a look that seemed to weigh the very air between them. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and almost too soft to hear. "There's a lot you don't know," he said, his tone heavy with meaning. "And I'm not sure you're ready to learn it." Before Maria could ask anything else, the door behind them slammed open. And once again, everything shifted. Secrets unveiled. The door slammed open with a force that startled Maria, making her jump. The sharp sound echoed through the room, and for a moment she stood frozen, her eyes flicking to Alex, then back to the entrance where a figure now stood. It was the man who had left just moments ago, the one who had warned her to leave. He stood in the doorway, his expression dark, his face a mask of resolve. Behind him, a tall woman appeared, her presence commanding. She was elegant, her dark hair flowing over her shoulders in loose waves. Her face was striking, almost ethereal in the dim light, and there was something in the way she carried herself confident, untouchable, that immediately made Maria feel small and insignificant. "Alex!" The woman's voice rang out, cool and steady, though there was a hidden intensity beneath it. "We need to talk." Maria's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She had no idea who this woman was, but the way she looked at Alex, the way the air shifted around them, made her realize that this was no ordinary visitor. She wasn't sure what was going on, but the tension was palpable. This was something serious, something important, and Maria was caught right in the middle of it. Alex turned slowly, his expression changing from cautious to something more guarded. "I know," he replied quietly. "I was just getting to that." Maria's breath caught in her throat as she watched the interaction. She had seen Alex in many situations before, but never like this. There was a side of him, a part of him, that she had never seen, the side that was in charge, calculating, and now, clearly, under some kind of pressure. The woman glanced at Maria, her eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to assess her. Then, without a word, she stepped into the room, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She moved with such grace, such authority, that it seemed impossible not to notice her. "You shouldn't be here," the woman said coolly, her eyes never leaving Maria. "This isn't the place for someone like you." Maria bristled at the words, feeling the sting of them more than she cared to admit. She wasn't used to being dismissed so easily, especially not in her own world. But something about the woman's icy demeanor made her want to stand her ground, to demand respect. "Who are you?" Maria asked, her voice more steady than she felt. She wasn't going to back down, not now. The woman didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked at Alex, her gaze softening only for a brief moment. "You've brought her into this, haven't you?" Her voice was tinged with disappointment, but there was also a trace of something more complex, something Maria couldn't quite place. Alex didn't immediately answer, and the room seemed to grow colder with every passing second. Maria could feel the weight of the moment settling in her chest. Something was unfolding here, something much bigger than her. The woman turned back to Maria, her eyes sharp as knives. "This is no place for a cleaning lady," she said, her voice low and almost mocking. "You don't belong here. You never did." Maria's heart skipped a beat. She felt the walls of the mansion closing in around her, trapping her in a world that she hadn't asked to be a part of. Her thoughts raced. Why was she even here? What had she gotten herself into? But before she could gather her thoughts, Alex stepped forward, his hand outstretched as if to intervene. "Enough, Claire," he said, his voice now more commanding than it had been before. "We have bigger issues to deal with." Claire's gaze shifted to Alex, and for the first time, Maria saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. The cold, composed woman seemed momentarily rattled, but she quickly regained control, her gaze hardening once more. "This isn't just about her," Claire snapped, her tone sharp. "It's about what she's seen, what she's stumbled into. This house, this family isn't what it seems, Alex. You know that." Alex's jaw clenched, and he turned to Maria, his expression conflicted. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "This isn't just about you or me or even the Wilsons. This is about something much bigger, something we've all been tied to for a long time." Maria's pulse quickened, and she took a step back, trying to process the new revelations. She had thought this was just a simple job, a way to make ends meet. But now she was learning that everything she'd thought she knew was wrong. This house, the people in it, the secrets that were lurking just beneath the surface, it was all connected to something far more dangerous than she could have imagined. "Alex, what are you saying?" Maria's voice wavered, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "What's going on here?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned toward Claire, as if silently asking for permission. She gave him a curt nod, and he slowly turned back to face Maria. "I can't tell you everything," Alex said, his voice filled with regret. "Not yet. But you need to know this. There are people in this house who have a lot of power, more power than you could possibly understand. And those people, they'll stop at nothing to protect their secrets." Maria's mind raced. She wanted to ask more, to demand every answer, but the weight of Alex's words hit her hard. What kind of people were they dealing with? What kind of secrets were hidden here, in this house of wealth and luxury? "I don't belong here," Maria whispered, the truth of her own thoughts sinking in. She hadn't realized it until now, but the weight of the situation was far too great for someone like her, someone who had no ties to this world. She had been thrust into something she didn't fully understand. Claire's voice cut through her thoughts, cold and deliberate. "You're right," she said. "You don't belong here, and the longer you stay, the more dangerous it will get for you." Maria felt the knot in her stomach tighten. The warning in Claire's voice was clear, but there was something else in her tone, something that suggested Maria wasn't just in danger from the people in this house, but from the very secrets they were all hiding. "Leave now," Claire said, her words final, "before it's too late." But Maria wasn't sure if she could leave anymore. The temptation to stay and uncover the truth was too strong. Whatever this house was hiding, whatever dark secrets it kept buried, she had to know what it was. She couldn't just walk away. "Are you saying I should just walk away from all of this?" Maria asked, her voice trembling but firm. "From everything I've seen? From everything that's happened?" For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was thick, and Maria could feel the weight of it pressing down on her chest. Alex finally spoke, his voice low and filled with an emotion Maria couldn't quite identify. "I'm saying this is bigger than you realize, and if you stay, you'll be pulled into something you might never escape." The room felt like it was closing in on her, and Maria's heart pounded with uncertainty. She had a choice to make, a choice that could change everything. The crossroads. Maria stood frozen, her mind racing with a million thoughts, none of which seemed to bring her any closer to clarity. The room was suffocating, filled with tension and unspoken truths. Claire's cold gaze was fixed on her, unwavering, like a predator watching its prey. And Alex, standing just a few feet away, looked torn, his face a mixture of regret and resolve. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," Claire said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You should walk away. You should leave now while you still can." Maria's chest tightened at the words. She wanted to walk away. She really did. Everything inside her screamed for her to run, to forget about the mysterious secrets of this house and return to the simplicity of her life. But the other part of her, the part that had been awakened by the baby, the part that couldn't ignore the strange pull of this place, couldn't shake the feeling that walking away would mean losing a chance to understand the truth. But what was the truth? And was it worth the risk? Her eyes flicked between Alex and Claire. Both were in their own worlds, caught in something deeper than she could comprehend. Alex had warned her before that she wasn't ready to know everything, that the deeper she dug, the more dangerous it would get. But was that just a way to protect her? Or was it a warning she couldn't ignore? "I don't know what's going on here," Maria finally said, her voice trembling with the weight of the decision. "But I can't just leave without knowing the truth, not after everything I've seen." Alex sighed, a deep, frustrated sound. He ran his hand through his hair, his eyes flicking to the floor as though he were trying to find the right words. But he didn't speak. Instead, it was Claire who stepped forward, her eyes cold as ice. "You're making a mistake," Claire said, her tone heavy with finality. "You have no idea what you're dealing with here. These people, your curiosity won't save you. It'll destroy you." Maria felt a wave of fear rise in her chest, but it wasn't enough to back her down. The fear had been building in her since she stepped foot in this house. The baby, the strange energy in the air, the unspoken tension between Alex and Claire, it all led her to this moment. She wasn't going to let them intimidate her, not now. "I'm not going to sit here and let you tell me what I should do," Maria said, her voice steady now, though her heart raced. "I need answers, and if you won't give them to me, then I'll find them myself." Claire's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile, but there was no warmth behind it. "You think you have a choice? You think you can just walk in here and ask for answers like you're some guest at a party?" she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "This is not a game, Maria. This isn't a story you can walk away from when you get bored." The weight of her words sank in. Maria's stomach twisted, and for a moment, doubt crept in. Was she in over her head? Was it too late to turn back? But Alex suddenly stepped in between her and Claire, his eyes narrowing. "That's enough, Claire," he said sharply. "We don't need to go down this path. Let her decide for herself." Claire didn't respond immediately. Instead, she regarded Alex with a steely gaze, as though weighing his words. The air was thick with tension, and Maria could feel the temperature in the room drop several degrees. Finally, Claire broke the silence. "You're just as stubborn as she is," she muttered under her breath. "Fine. Do what you want, but don't say I didn't warn you." With a swift turn, Claire walked toward the door, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She paused just before exiting and glanced back one last time. "You'll regret this," she said coldly, before she disappeared from the room. The moment she left, Maria felt a strange sense of relief, but it was quickly replaced with a deep sense of uncertainty. What had just happened? Why was Claire so insistent on getting her to leave? What did she know that Maria didn't? Alex turned to Maria, his face softening just a little. "I didn't want it to go this way," he said quietly. "But now you've made your choice. I can't stop you from getting involved, but I need you to understand what you're walking into." Maria nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She was scared, but there was no turning back now. She had already seen too much. And she knew deep down that the answers she sought weren't just going to appear on their own. She had to dig, to push, to get to the bottom of everything. "Tell me everything," she said, her voice firm now, as she looked Alex square in the eyes. "I don't care what it takes. I need to know what's going on here." Alex hesitated, his gaze flicking toward the door Claire had just exited through. For a moment, Maria could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between his desire to protect her and his own buried secrets. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but then closed it, taking a deep breath. "There's a lot you don't know," he said, his voice low and urgent. "About the Wilsons, about their business, about everything this house represents." Maria took a step closer to him, her eyes wide with anticipation. "What do you mean? What business? What are they hiding?" Alex glanced around, as if ensuring they were alone. "This house, Maria," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not just a mansion. It's a fortress, a symbol of something much bigger than anyone realizes. The Wilsons, they aren't just wealthy people living their lives in luxury. They're part of a larger network, a group of powerful individuals who control much more than you think." Maria's mind spun, trying to grasp what Alex was saying. She had known the Wilsons were rich, but she had never imagined anything like this. "What kind of network?" Maria asked, her voice thick with disbelief. Alex's face darkened. "The kind that doesn't take kindly to people digging too deep. They've been hiding their true influence for years, and now that you've gotten involved, you're a threat to them. They won't stop until they've silenced anyone who stands in their way." Maria felt her heart drop. "Are you telling me that I'm in danger?" Alex's expression hardened. "You already are." The weight of his words hit her like a punch to the gut. She had no idea how deep she had gotten into this world of secrets and danger. But there was no going back now. The truth was out there, and it was waiting for her to uncover it. Maria knew she had no choice but to keep moving forward. The path ahead was uncertain, and the dangers were real. But she couldn't stop. Not now. Not after everything she had learned. She took a deep breath and looked up at Alex. "Then let's find out what they're hiding. Together." Into the darkness. Maria's heart hammered in her chest as Alex's words settled over her. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her, the unknown pulling her deeper into a web she had no intention of getting caught in. And yet, here she was, in the midst of something much larger than herself, standing face to face with a man who knew more than he was letting on. "I don't think you understand the depth of this," Alex said quietly, his eyes searching hers. "The Wilsons are connected to people and organizations that operate in the shadows. They have resources, connections that go beyond anything you can imagine. We're talking about influence, manipulation, things that aren't just about money. They'll do anything to protect their secrets." Maria felt a chill run down her spine, and a cold sweat began to form on the back of her neck. She hadn't expected to hear anything like this. The life she'd known, the world she'd come from, was so far removed from what Alex was describing. And yet, as strange as it seemed, a part of her knew he wasn't lying. The house, the silence, the baby. It was all a puzzle, and she'd stumbled into the middle of it. "So, what do we do now?" Maria asked, her voice trembling but filled with a quiet resolve. She was scared, no question about it, but she couldn't turn back now. Not after everything she'd seen, everything she'd heard. The pieces were all coming together, but she didn't know where they would lead. Alex's gaze softened, his expression still conflicted. "We have to dig deeper, Maria. We have to find out exactly what they're hiding and why. But we have to be careful. If we go too far, they'll know, and they won't stop until we're out of the picture." He paced for a moment, his hands clasped behind his back. "I've been on the outside of this for too long, but now that you're involved, there's no turning back. We need to stick together if we're going to get the answers we need." Maria nodded, her mind racing. She wanted to push him for more details, to ask why he was involved in all of this, but she didn't. She already knew the answer. He was as much a part of this dark world as anyone else. Whether he wanted to admit it or not, he was tangled up in this mystery, just like her. "So, where do we start?" she asked, her voice steadying. She was still scared, but she was determined. She had to know what was going on, for her own peace of mind and for the baby she had saved. Alex took a deep breath, then looked toward the hallway that led to the rest of the house. "We need to start with the archives. There's a room hidden away. Not many people know about it. It's where they keep the records, the documents they don't want anyone to find. If we can get in there, we might be able to find something that connects the Wilsons to whatever they're hiding." Maria's heart skipped a beat. "Records? What kind of records?" Alex hesitated. "The kind that can expose everything. Business dealings, connections, the dark side of their operations. They've kept it all hidden, locked away. But if we find it—" He trailed off, his gaze darkening as the weight of his own words seemed to sink in. Maria could see the concern in his eyes, the fear that was hard for him to mask. This wasn't just about finding the truth. This was about survival. "We have to be careful," he said finally, his voice quieter. "There are people who would do anything to keep this all buried. And if they find out we're looking, they won't hesitate to make us disappear." Maria's stomach tightened, but she didn't let the fear show. She had to push past it. If she didn't, she'd never get the answers she needed. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm despite the nerves swirling in her chest. Alex gave her a nod, then led the way down the hallway. As they passed through the large, empty rooms, Maria's thoughts kept racing. This wasn't just a random cleaning job anymore. This was a life-or-death situation, and she had unknowingly stepped into the middle of it. But why? Why had she been chosen to see this? What made her different from anyone else? They arrived at a door at the far end of the hall, one that was set off from the rest of the rooms in the house. The door was old, worn, and looked almost out of place compared to the rest of the mansion's pristine decor. Alex paused before it, his hand hovering over the doorknob. "This is it," he whispered, looking over his shoulder at Maria. "If we go in, there's no turning back. Are you sure you want to do this?" Maria didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, her voice steady now. "I need to know what's really going on here." Alex nodded, and with a swift motion, he unlocked the door and pushed it open. The room beyond was small and dimly lit, with only a single overhead light casting long shadows on the floor. The air was musty, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. Inside, there were shelves filled with old files and boxes, paper stacked haphazardly. Maria stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room, taking in the weight of what they were about to uncover. "This is where it all started," Alex murmured as he moved toward one of the shelves. He began to pull open drawers, flipping through the papers with a practiced hand. "The Wilsons kept everything here, every secret. If we can find the right documents, we'll know exactly what we're dealing with." Maria's eyes darted around the room, her heart racing. She didn't know what to expect, but she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever they found here would change everything. The walls of the house seemed to close in on her, as if they were watching, waiting for her to make a mistake. She moved toward a filing cabinet in the back of the room, pulling open a drawer. The files were neatly organized, but the moment she touched them, a sense of dread settled over her. She flipped through the papers quickly, her fingers trembling. Most of the documents were business-related, contracts and financial reports that meant little to her. But as she went deeper into the stack, one file caught her eye. It was marked with a red stamp, the words "Top Secret" printed in bold letters across the front. Maria's breath caught in her throat as she pulled it from the drawer. She opened it slowly, carefully, as if expecting something to leap out at her. Inside, there were photographs, pictures of people she didn't recognize, all standing together in a dimly lit room. The faces were blurry, but the setting was unmistakable. It was a warehouse of some sort, and there was a table covered with papers and documents. "This is it," Maria whispered, her voice barely audible. She handed the file to Alex, who examined it quickly. His face went pale. This is bad," he said, his voice tight with fear. "These people, they're part of a larger operation. This is what they've been hiding." Maria's mind spun as she looked at the images in front of her. These people, these unknown faces, they were linked to the Wilsons. But how? And why were they so desperate to keep this hidden? The answers were just within reach, but Maria could feel the clock ticking. They were running out of time. "We need to find out who they are," Alex said urgently, "and we need to do it fast." Maria nodded. "Let's find the rest." As they continued to search, the feeling that they were being watched never left. The mansion, once so quiet and peaceful, now felt like a ticking time bomb. And the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous it became. But Maria was already in too deep. She had crossed the line, and there was no going back. Unraveling the lies. Maria's mind raced as she glanced at the file in Alex's hands. The pictures and documents were a damning glimpse into a world she'd never imagined, a world where power, influence, and secrecy controlled everything. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the filing cabinet, trying to steady herself. Every paper, every photograph they uncovered only added to the weight of the mystery and the realization that the deeper they went, the more danger they invited. "What does this mean?" she whispered, her voice barely audible as she tried to piece together the fragments of information. "Who are these people?" Alex didn't answer immediately. His eyes were scanning the file quickly, his brow furrowing in concentration. For a moment, Maria thought he might not answer at all, but then his lips parted, and his voice was filled with a deep, grim understanding. "These people," Alex said, his voice low and tense, "they're part of a syndicate, an underground network that controls a lot more than just business deals. They've been operating in the shadows for years, laundering money, manipulating political outcomes, and controlling resources all over the world. The Wilsons are the face of it, the public figures. But behind the scenes, they're just pawns." Maria felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had suspected something was off about the Wilsons. But this was more than she could have imagined. It wasn't just that they were wealthy. It was that their wealth and power were built on lies and corruption, on a foundation of dark secrets that could destroy everything. "But why is this happening?" Maria asked, her voice shaking. "Why involve the Wilsons in all of this? Why bring me into it?" Alex sighed and leaned back against the shelf, rubbing his eyes. "The Wilsons have been the perfect cover. People trust them. They've built their empire on being untouchable, on presenting an image of success, elegance, and respectability. But beneath that image is a much darker truth. They've been involved in this syndicate for years, helping to launder money and protect the organization from being exposed." Maria's heart raced. It all seemed too far-fetched, like something out of a crime thriller. But as she stared at the photographs in front of her, something about it felt real, too real. "But what does all this have to do with me?" Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She could feel the fear beginning to creep in, the weight of the unknown pressing in on her. "How did I end up in the middle of this?" Alex hesitated, clearly weighing his words. He looked at her with a mixture of pity and frustration, as though he wished he could protect her from the truth. "You're here because you've seen too much. The Wilsons don't leave loose ends. They don't let anyone who knows their secrets walk away. And now you're tied into this whether you like it or not." Maria swallowed hard, the reality of his words settling in. She had always thought of herself as just another worker, cleaning up after people who lived lives far beyond her own. But now, she was involved in something far bigger than she ever could have imagined. and there was no going back. The room felt colder suddenly, the silence pressing down on her. She wanted to pull away, to run, but the truth kept pulling her deeper. The answers were just within reach, and there was no turning back now. "How do we stop this?" Maria asked, her voice shaking but determined. "How do we expose them?" Alex looked at her for a long moment, his face hardened with determination. "We don't just expose them, we bring down the entire operation. We take down the Wilsons and everyone connected to them. We burn everything they've worked for. It's the only way to ensure that they can't hurt anyone else." Maria's heart thundered in her chest as she processed his words. The idea of going up against such a powerful and dangerous group was terrifying, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that it was the only way forward. The Wilsons had been hiding the truth for far too long, and now it was her turn to fight back. Alex began rifling through more files, pulling out documents with alarming speed, his fingers moving like lightning over the pages. His face was set in grim determination, but Maria could see the toll it was taking on him. She could see the fear, the weariness in his eyes. He knew what this would cost them. "We have to act fast," Alex said, his voice low and urgent. "We've already come this far. There's no more time for hesitation. The Wilsons will be back soon, and they'll know we've been here." Maria's pulse quickened. "What happens if they catch us?" Alex's gaze hardened, and for a moment, Maria saw the cold, calculating side of him that had been hidden up until now. "They'll do whatever it takes to keep their secrets safe, and that means they'll do whatever it takes to silence us." Maria took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. The truth was out there, and she wasn't going to let fear stop her from uncovering it. She had already seen enough to know that this fight was bigger than herself, bigger than any one person. This wasn't just about the Wilsons. It was about an entire system built on lies, and she wasn't going to let it stand. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice steadier now. Alex glanced at the clock on the wall, his eyes narrowing. "We need to access the main vault. It's the heart of everything, the documents, the proof, everything they've hidden for years. If we can get in there, we can bring it all down." Maria nodded. "Where is it?" "In the basement," Alex said, closing the file in his hands and tucking it under his arm. "But getting in won't be easy. The vault is secured by a high-tech system, and there's no telling how many security measures are in place. We need to move fast and stay quiet." Maria's heart pounded in her chest as they made their way out of the room and toward the basement door. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of the mission pressing on her shoulders. The walls of the house seemed to close in as they descended deeper into the dark, and Maria couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. But she had no choice but to keep moving forward. As they reached the basement, Alex paused, his hand on the door. "This is it," he said quietly. "Once we go in, there's no turning back." Maria nodded, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. She was scared, more scared than she'd ever been in her life. But she also felt a sense of resolve that had been missing from her life for a long time. She had been living in the shadows for too long. Now it was time to step into the light and bring everything into the open. "Let's do this," Maria said, her voice steady. Alex opened the door, and they stepped into the unknown. The vault. The basement was colder than the rest of the mansion, and the air felt thick with tension. The low hum of the house's ventilation system was the only sound that accompanied their footsteps as they descended the stairs. Maria's heart pounded in her chest, every muscle in her body tensed with the weight of what they were about to do. This was the moment that would define everything. If they succeeded, they would bring the Wilsons and everything they stood for down. But if they failed, Maria pushed the thought from her mind. There was no room for failure now. Alex stopped at the base of the stairs, turning toward her with a look of determination on his face. His eyes flicked toward the door at the far end of the room, the entrance to the vault. Maria's stomach twisted as she looked at it. The door was a heavy, reinforced steel barrier, the kind that could withstand anything short of an explosion. It looked like a vault in every sense of the word, a secret, impenetrable place where the Wilsons kept their darkest truths locked away. "We're almost there," Alex said quietly. "Once we get inside, we'll have everything we need, all the documents, all the evidence. We can finally expose them. Maria nodded, her mind focused. Let's do it. They approached the vault door, and Alex's hand hovered over a panel next to it. The panel was sleek and modern, its surface glowing faintly with an electronic keypad. It was clear that the vault was secured with a high-tech system, one that would require more than just brute force to break into. Maria's breath caught in her throat as she realized how close they were to the heart of everything. Alex turned to her, his voice low. This is the tricky part. If I fail to crack the code, we'll be locked out for good. We can't afford that. We have one shot at this. Maria's palms were sweaty as she nodded. You've got this. Alex's fingers flew across the keypad, his expression focused, his brow furrowed in concentration. Maria watched him, her eyes darting to the door behind them every few seconds, her mind racing with the possible consequences of getting caught. She couldn't help but think of the warning Claire had given her, that they wouldn't stop until they silenced anyone who posed a threat. The seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity. Maria's heart beat louder with each passing moment, the weight of the silence growing heavier. She could almost hear the clock ticking down, as if time itself was conspiring against them. Finally, Alex stepped back, his face breaking into a small, tense smile. We're in, he said, his voice tinged with relief. The door slowly groaned open, revealing the darkness inside. It was a small room, no larger than a walk-in closet, but it was packed with files, old documents, and a variety of sealed containers. Maria's eyes widened as she stepped inside, taking in the magnitude of what they were looking at. This was it, the proof they needed to take down the Wilsons. Alex stepped in beside her, grabbing the nearest file and flipping it open. This is it, he said, his voice filled with awe. These are the records, everything we've been looking for. Maria moved to the opposite side of the room, her eyes scanning the shelves, trying to take it all in. There were stacks of paper, each labeled with a number or code, the significance of which was immediately clear to her. This was the heart of the Wilsons' empire, their power, their influence, all hidden away in these documents. She reached for a file near the back, her hands shaking as she pulled it out. The title on the cover read, Project Shadow. It was stamped with the same red letters as the file she had seen earlier, top secret. Maria's breath caught in her throat. This was it, the document that could unravel everything. She opened it slowly, her fingers trembling as she read the first few lines. The words on the page were enough to make her stomach churn. The Wilsons had been involved in everything: drug trafficking, illegal arms deals, political bribery, you name it. It was all here, written in black and white. The syndicate wasn't just an underground network. It was a global enterprise, with ties to governments, corporations, and criminal organizations all over the world. Alex moved beside her, his eyes scanning the pages. He was silent for a long moment, processing the information before speaking. This is it, he said softly. This is the proof we need to bring them down. Maria couldn't tear her eyes away from the documents. The weight of what she was seeing settled over her like a thick fog. The Wilsons had built their empire on lies, on manipulation, and on exploiting people for their own gain. And now, it was all exposed. Alex turned to her, his expression grim. We need to get this information to the authorities, but we can't just walk out of here with it. The Wilsons will know immediately, and they'll come after us. Maria's mind raced. What do we do? Alex's face hardened. We have to burn everything down. Every document, every file. We destroy it all. The only way to keep them from coming after us is to make sure there's nothing left to find. Maria hesitated for a moment. The idea of destroying all of this, all the evidence they had worked so hard to uncover, felt wrong. But she understood what Alex meant. If they left any trace behind, the Wilsons would find a way to cover it up. They had to take everything with them, make sure there was no way for the truth to be buried again. I'll help, Maria said firmly, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. Alex nodded, his eyes softening just slightly. We'll do this together. They worked quickly, tearing through the shelves and gathering the documents. As they stuffed them into bags, the enormity of the task weighed on them. They couldn't afford to miss anything. Every scrap of paper, every hidden file had to be destroyed. Maria's hands were shaking as she stuffed the last of the papers into a bag, her thoughts racing. There was no going back now. This was it. They had exposed the Wilsons' secrets, and now they had to ensure that no one could stop the truth from coming to light. Just as they were finishing, Maria heard a sound, a faint noise, like the creak of a door. Her blood ran cold. Someone was coming. They had to move, and fast. "Alex," she whispered urgently, her heart pounding in her chest. "We're not alone." Alex's eyes widened in alarm, and he grabbed the bag from her hands, shoving it under his arm. "Let's go," he hissed. "Now." They rushed toward the door, but as Alex reached for the handle, the sound of footsteps grew louder, closer. Maria's breath hitched. They were out of time. Alex pushed the door open and pulled her into the hallway. "This way," he whispered, guiding her down a narrow corridor. "We have to get out before they realize what we've done." Maria's pulse raced as they moved through the darkened halls, the weight of the documents in the bag heavy on her back. Every step felt like it could be their last. They had uncovered the truth. Now, they had to survive it. The final escape. Maria's heart raced as Alex tugged her through the narrow corridor. Every footstep felt like it echoed louder than the last, the sound reverberating through the walls of the house. The documents, their only leverage, their only chance to expose the Wilsons, were in his hands, and the reality of their situation crashed down on her like a ton of bricks. They were close, so close to being free of this nightmare, but the feeling of being watched, hunted, pressed in on her. "Stay quiet," Alex hissed, his voice low and urgent. He kept his head down, moving quickly but carefully, guiding Maria through the shadows of the mansion's halls. They were no longer in the brightly lit sections of the house. Now they were deep in the belly of the beast, moving through dimly lit corridors and hidden spaces that most people would never see. Maria could feel the cold sweat running down her back. Her palms were clammy, her breath shallow, but she pushed it aside. She had no choice but to keep moving. They couldn't afford to get caught now, not when they were so close. "We're almost at the exit," Alex murmured, glancing behind them nervously. "Just a few more turns." Maria nodded, her mind racing. Her thoughts kept circling back to the documents they had just uncovered. The files were filled with names, dates, connections to people in positions of power, governments, businesses, and organizations. The Wilsons were far more than a wealthy family with a few dirty secrets. They were part of a global syndicate that controlled a vast underground empire. And now, Alex and Maria had everything they needed to expose it all. But they didn't have long. The Wilsons would be back soon, and once they realized their secrets had been exposed, they wouldn't hesitate to come after them. Maria knew they were running out of time. As they approached a door at the end of the hallway, Alex stopped abruptly, holding up his hand for Maria to freeze. He listened intently, his body rigid with tension. For a moment, all Maria could hear was the pounding of her own heart in her ears. Footsteps. They were close, too close. Alex motioned for her to follow him into a small alcove. The two of them pressed themselves against the wall, barely breathing, barely moving. Maria's eyes locked on Alex's, and for the first time in what felt like hours, she saw the raw fear in his eyes. He wasn't the cool, collected man she had seen before. Right now, they were just two people in a desperate fight for survival. The footsteps grew louder. Maria held her breath, her mind racing, every nerve in her body on high alert. Whoever it was, they were getting closer, and the tension in the air was almost unbearable. Then, just as the sound of footsteps reached the alcove, they suddenly stopped. Maria's pulse raced in her throat as the world seemed to freeze. Someone was right on the other side of the wall, so close that she could almost hear their breath. Seconds ticked by like hours, and Maria's body tensed, ready to spring into action at any moment. She could feel the heat of Alex's body next to hers, could smell the faint trace of sweat on him as he held his breath. The seconds dragged on, and Maria thought her heart might burst from the pressure. But then, just as quickly as the footsteps had come, they faded away. Whoever it was had moved on. Maria exhaled shakily, her body sagging with relief. Alex's hand was still gripping hers, and he pulled her carefully out of the alcove. His eyes were wide with alertness, but they were also filled with that same determination. They couldn't stay here. They had to keep moving. "Let's go," he whispered urgently. They moved quickly, ducking into the shadows and keeping to the edges of the mansion. Maria's mind was still reeling from the close call, but she knew they couldn't stop now. The exit was within reach, but so was the threat of discovery. The mansion felt alive with danger now. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant sound, made her heart skip a beat. They weren't safe yet, not by a long shot. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the door at the back of the house. It was a small, inconspicuous exit, hidden from the main hall. Alex turned the handle, and the door creaked open, revealing the dark night outside. The fresh air hit Maria like a wave, and she took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. But there was no time for rest. Alex pulled her into the night, and they moved quickly toward the side of the mansion. The yard was vast, the grass tall, and the moonlight cast long shadows across the grounds. The mansion loomed behind them like a dark giant, and Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them from the windows. She glanced over her shoulder, but saw nothing. Still, the unease remained. They reached the edge of the property, where a small car waited in the shadows. Alex opened the door, and Maria slid into the passenger seat, her hands trembling as she buckled herself in. The engine started with a low hum, and Alex pulled out of the driveway, speeding down the private road. Maria looked out the window, the mansion disappearing into the distance behind them. But even as they put more distance between themselves and the Wilson estate, she couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't really free. "There's no going back now," Alex said, his voice low as he kept his eyes on the road. "The Wilsons will come after us. They'll stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried." Maria nodded. "I know, but we have what we need now. We have the proof, and we're not going to stop until we bring them down." Alex glanced over at her, his face softening for a moment. "You're right. This is the only way. But we have to be careful. We can't trust anyone, not even the authorities. The Wilsons have their fingers in everything." Maria didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The weight of the truth they carried in the back seat of the car was enough. They had just set in motion a chain of events that could change everything, and the road ahead was uncertain, filled with danger and threats that they couldn't even imagine. But one thing was certain. They were no longer just victims of the Wilsons' world. They were the ones with the power now. "We'll make them pay for what they've done," Maria said, her voice filled with quiet determination. Alex nodded. "We will. Together." And as the car sped into the night, the city lights flickering in the distance, Maria finally allowed herself to breathe. It wasn't over yet, but it would be soon. The storm unleashed. The city lights blurred as they sped down the highway, the night swallowing them whole. The rush of the engine was the only sound, but inside the car, it felt as though the air was thick with unspoken thoughts. Maria's mind churned with everything that had happened: the vault, the documents, the images of the Wilsons' twisted empire. The more she thought about it, the more the weight of the truth seemed unbearable. The evidence they had in the back seat could change the world, expose the Wilsons' corrupt empire to the public. But there were risks, dangers lurking just around the corner. For the first time in hours, Maria took a deep breath and looked over at Alex. He was focused on the road, his jaw clenched, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. His face, lit only by the passing streetlights, was hard, unreadable. But his eyes, when they flicked to her, held something soft, but with a deep underlying worry. "You're quiet," she said softly, breaking the silence. "What are you thinking?" Alex's eyes stayed ahead, but he exhaled heavily. "I'm thinking we've made a powerful enemy, and I'm thinking we're not going to have much time before they come for us." Maria swallowed hard, her grip tightening on the seat. The reality of what they had just done was finally setting in. They had uncovered the Wilsons' darkest secrets, and now they were exposed. Alex was right. There was no turning back. "We can't just sit around waiting for them to come for us," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear gnawing at her. "We have to act. We have to make sure the information gets to the right people, the authorities, the press. If we don't, the Wilsons will find a way to bury it." Alex glanced at her, a flicker of approval in his eyes. "You're right. We can't let them silence us. But we can't trust the authorities either. The Wilsons have connections everywhere. They could reach into any part of the system. We need to be careful who we trust." Maria nodded. It was true. In this world of shadowy alliances and global power, even the most reputable institutions could be compromised. The Wilsons had worked their way into every corner of society, and there was no telling how deep their influence ran. "So what do we do?" she asked. "Who do we trust?" Alex's lips pressed into a thin line as he thought. "We need someone who can help us from the outside, someone who can get the evidence to the public without the Wilsons stopping them." He glanced at her again, his eyes serious. "I know someone, a journalist. They've been trying to expose the Wilsons for years. They've been digging into their operations, but they haven't been able to get the proof. We have what they need." Maria's heart skipped a beat. A journalist? How do we know we can trust them? Alex was quiet for a moment, his grip tightening on the wheel. "Because they've been fighting the same fight we have. And because they've been investigating the Wilsons for years, long before we ever knew what was going on." Maria didn't say anything at first. She wasn't sure what to think. But one thing was clear, this was their best chance. If they were going to expose the Wilsons, they needed someone with the resources, the connections, and the credibility to make it happen. Alex's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "I know the risks, but we don't have a choice. If we sit back and wait, we're done for. We have to move now, before they realize what we've done." Maria nodded slowly, her mind racing with possibilities. She had to be strong now. They had come so far, uncovered so much. There was no turning back. "What's the plan?" she asked. "We head to the city," Alex said, his voice resolute. "We'll meet with the journalist and hand over the evidence. If they're on our side, they'll know what to do with it. If not..." He trailed off, but Maria understood the implication. They didn't have time to waste. They needed to act before the Wilsons closed in on them. The drive felt endless, the dark road stretching out before them like a tunnel with no light at the end. Every passing car, every shadow in the distance seemed to be a potential threat. Maria's thoughts were a whirlwind. She couldn't shake the images of the documents, the files filled with names and connections. The Wilsons' empire was so much bigger than she had imagined, and now it was up to them to bring it down. After what felt like an eternity, the car pulled off the highway and into a quiet, dimly lit street in the city. Alex turned to Maria, his eyes sharp. "Stay close," he said. "We don't know who might be watching." Maria nodded, her pulse quickening as they parked the car and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The cool night air hit her, but she barely felt it as they moved quickly, blending into the shadows. Alex led the way, his pace quick and purposeful. They arrived at an old building tucked between two high-rises. The entrance was unmarked, just a small door with a buzzer next to it. Alex pressed the button, and after a moment, the door clicked open. They slipped inside, and Alex led her down a narrow hallway to a set of stairs. Maria could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of what was about to unfold. She wasn't sure if she was ready for it, but she didn't have a choice. At the top of the stairs, they stopped in front of a door. Alex knocked twice, and after a few seconds, the door opened to reveal a man in his late 30s, wearing a dark jacket and glasses. His expression was guarded, but there was a sharpness to him that Maria immediately recognized. "This is Maria," Alex said, his voice low but steady. "We need your help." The man, who had introduced himself as Noah, stepped aside and gestured for them to enter. As Maria stepped into the small apartment, she took in the cluttered surroundings, piles of papers, photographs pinned to the walls, and a cluttered desk with a computer running in the corner. This was a place where things happened in secret, a place where information was power. "We have what you need," Alex said, his voice urgent. He handed Noah the bag containing the files and documents. "This is everything." Noah didn't hesitate. He opened the bag and immediately began scanning the contents. his face hardening with each new piece of evidence he uncovered. "You've got the goods," he said, his voice tight with disbelief. "This is it." Maria's throat went dry as she watched him. This was the moment everything they had worked for, everything they had fought for, was in this room. If Noah could get this into the right hands, the truth about the Wilsons would finally come to light. But as Noah flipped through the files, his eyes flicked to the window behind them. His expression darkened. "We're not safe here," he said suddenly. "You need to get out. Now." Maria's blood ran cold. "What's going on?" Noah didn't answer directly. Instead, he grabbed a few of the more critical files and stuffed them into his jacket. "The Wilsons have people everywhere," he said, his voice low. "You've stirred the hornet's nest. You need to go." Alex grabbed Maria's arm, pulling her toward the door. "We're leaving. Now." As they stepped out into the hallway, Maria could feel the weight of the world bearing down on them. The fight was far from over. They had exposed the truth. But now they had to survive it. And the storm that was about to hit would be like nothing they'd ever seen. The chase. The city was alive with movement, the neon lights casting long, distorted shadows across the streets as Alex and Maria moved through the dim alleyways. They kept close to the walls, their footsteps quick but calculated, every sound magnified in the dead of night. Maria's mind raced, adrenaline pumping through her veins. She had never been a part of anything like this, never thought her life would be defined by secrets, danger, and constant fear. But now, she was tangled in a web of conspiracy, and there was no way out. "Stay close," Alex whispered, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. "We're not safe yet. We need to get to the car and get out of here before they catch up." Maria nodded, her hand clenched tightly around the strap of her bag. The files, the evidence they had worked so hard to collect, were now the most valuable and dangerous things she had. The Wilsons had people everywhere, and now they knew that Maria and Alex had what they needed to bring them down. As they rounded a corner, Alex motioned for her to stop, his sharp eyes scanning the street ahead. Maria's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to peer through the shadows, but it was too dark to make out anything clearly. She swallowed hard, the tension in the air thickening with every passing second. "We're almost there," Alex muttered, his voice tight. "Keep moving." They hurried forward, the sounds of the city buzzing around them. But even though they were trying to stay inconspicuous, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching them. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as they approached the end of the alley. Alex was right, they couldn't afford to be careless now. Not with the Wilsons' people potentially on their tail. As they emerged from the alley into the main street, the familiar hum of traffic and distant sirens filled the air. Alex's eyes darted to a nearby intersection. "That's where the car is," he said, his tone urgent. "Stay close, and don't let anyone see us." Maria's pulse quickened as they crossed the street, her mind racing with the thought that at any moment, someone could spring out of the shadows. Every car that passed felt like a potential threat, every pedestrian a possible ally or enemy. They reached the parked car, and Alex quickly slid into the driver's seat, motioning for Maria to get in. As she closed the door behind her, she couldn't help but glance over her shoulder, half expecting someone to be following them. The streets seemed empty, but the feeling of being hunted never left her. Alex started the car, and they pulled away from the curb, merging into the flow of traffic. Maria tried to steady her breath, her heart still racing. She wanted to believe they were safe, but she knew better. The Wilsons would not let them go so easily. "We need to lay low for a while," Alex said, keeping his voice low as he navigated the car through the streets. "We'll head to a safe house. It's the only place I can think of where we'll be off the radar for a bit." Maria glanced at him, her brow furrowed. "A safe house? Who else knows about it?" Alex hesitated for a moment, his eyes on the road. "Only a few trusted people. People who've been in this fight longer than we have. We can't trust anyone else right now." Maria nodded. She didn't have to ask why. She knew. In this game, trust was a luxury they could no longer afford. The car sped through the city, and for a moment Maria allowed herself to breathe. The world outside seemed normal, unaffected by the chaos they had just unleashed. But she knew better than to let her guard down. The Wilsons were far from finished with them. They would be hunting them down relentlessly, using every resource at their disposal to erase any trace of the truth. As they crossed through another neighborhood, Alex glanced in the rearview mirror. His eyes narrowed, and his grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. Maria's heart skipped a beat. What's wrong?" Alex didn't answer immediately. He swerved the car to the right, taking a sharp turn down a side street. The engine roared as he pushed the accelerator harder. "Someone's tailing us," he said, his voice tense. "They must have spotted us leaving the meeting." Maria's pulse shot up, and she twisted in her seat, trying to look through the rear window. There was a car behind them, but it was too far back for her to see clearly. She could feel the tension mounting, the fear creeping up her spine. They were being followed. "Do you think it's them?" Maria asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Alex's grip on the wheel didn't loosen. "I'm not sure, but we can't take any chances. Hold on tight." He made another sharp turn, this time onto an even narrower road. Maria gripped the seat, her breath quickening as the car slid around the corner. The wheels squealed slightly, and Alex pushed the car harder, trying to shake the tail. "I'm going to take the back roads," Alex said, his voice strained. "We'll lose them in the traffic if we can make the next turn." Maria nodded, her mind racing. Every turn, every move, felt like a desperate attempt to escape an inevitable confrontation. But there was no choice. They couldn't let the Wilsons get their hands on the evidence. Not now. Not after everything they had done to get this far. The car lurched forward as Alex took another sharp turn. They sped down a quiet residential street, the headlights of the car behind them growing dimmer as they put more distance between them. Alex glanced at Maria, his eyes filled with determination. "We're almost there," he said, his voice steady but edged with tension. "Just a little longer." Maria's hands tightened around her bag. The documents inside felt like a lead weight, a constant reminder of how high the stakes were. They couldn't afford to lose them. Not now, not when they were so close to taking the Wilsons down. "Do you think we can really do this?" Maria asked, her voice shaky but hopeful. "Expose everything?" Alex didn't answer right away, his eyes focused on the road ahead. He was concentrating, trying to shake off their pursuers, but Maria could sense his doubt. He knew as well as she did that the odds were stacked against them. But it didn't matter. They had already crossed the line. There was no turning back now. "I don't know," Alex said finally, his voice low. "But I know one thing we can't stop now." The silence between them was thick, charged with the weight of their decision. They had come too far to turn back. And as the city passed by in a blur of lights and shadows, Maria knew one thing for certain. The storm had only just begun. The walls close. In Maria's heart pounded as they drove further into the city's quiet back streets. The faint hum of the engine was the only sound in the car, the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. She kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see the headlights of the car behind them inching closer. But there was nothing. The darkness of the night seemed to stretch on forever, and with every turn Alex made, the world outside felt like it was slipping further away from her grasp. The rearview mirror showed only empty road, but Maria couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Even as Alex weaved through the side streets with practiced ease, she could feel the eyes of the Wilsons' network closing in on them, no matter how far they ran. She wasn't naive enough to think they had outrun the threat. The Wilsons had eyes everywhere. The more they tried to escape, the tighter the noose would become. Alex glanced at her, his jaw tight. "We're almost there," he said, his voice steady but strained. "Just stay alert." Maria nodded, her mind reeling with the gravity of everything that had happened. The Wilsons, the evidence, the files they had uncovered. They were more than just a family, they were the linchpin of a global syndicate. And now that the truth was out, there was no turning back. She had seen the documents, the dark deals that had been hidden away for so long. The Wilsons were involved in everything: corruption, money laundering, illegal trade. And now, Alex and Maria were the ones with the power to expose them. But at what cost? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden jolt of the car as Alex made another sharp turn. They were on a narrow road now, surrounded by dark, empty buildings. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to stretch out of the darkness. Maria's senses heightened, her eyes scanning the road ahead, looking for any signs of danger. Alex's grip tightened on the wheel, his expression unreadable. He was driving faster now, his focus entirely on the road ahead. The car's engine roared as they sped down the street, the tires screeching as Alex took another corner too fast. "Alex," Maria said, her voice rising with concern. "What's going on? We're almost there, right?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed locked on the road, but his knuckles were white from gripping the wheel so tightly. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice low but urgent. "They know we're coming." Maria's blood ran cold. "What do you mean? How?" Alex's gaze flicked to the rearview mirror. His eyes narrowed as he saw the faint glint of headlights in the distance. "I'm not sure, but they've been tracking us. The car, the file, everything." Maria's pulse quickened. The Wilsons weren't just coming for them, they were already on their tail. They had been playing this game for too long, and now, it seemed the final pieces were falling into place. "Can we outrun them?" Maria asked, her voice shaking, but she forced herself to stay calm. Alex didn't respond right away. Instead, he made another sharp turn, the tires screeching again as they slid around the corner. The headlights behind them were getting closer. Too close. "We're not outrunning them," Alex said, his voice tight with frustration. "We need to get to the safe house, and we need to do it now. They're not going to stop until we're out of the picture." Maria's stomach twisted. They were so close to safety, but now the walls were closing in. The sound of the car's engine was drowned out by the roar of the approaching vehicle behind them. Every instinct in Maria's body screamed that they needed to do something, anything, to get away. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the night, followed by the distinct sound of metal scraping against metal. Maria gasped, her eyes widening as she turned to see the car behind them. It wasn't just following them anymore. It was closing in, pushing forward with a sense of urgency. "They're trying to box us in," Alex muttered under his breath, his voice a mix of anger and fear. "We've got to make a break for it." Maria's mind raced as Alex swerved again, narrowly avoiding a collision. The sound of the car behind them grew louder, the driver relentless in their pursuit. The safe house was so close, but the Wilsons weren't going to let them make it without a fight. "Alex, we have to do something." Maria's voice was panicked now, the reality of the situation sinking in. "I know," Alex replied sharply. "I know." His eyes were fixed on the road, but his mind was clearly working quickly. "We need to lose them. Just keep calm. Stay low." Maria's hands gripped the seat as they raced down the dark street. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her heart pounding as the car behind them seemed to gain ground with every passing second. They were so close to the end of this nightmare, but now the nightmare was catching up. Suddenly, Alex slammed his foot down on the accelerator. The car shot forward with a burst of speed, pushing them ahead by several yards. Maria's body jerked forward as the force pushed her back into her seat. She glanced at Alex, his face a mask of focus and determination. "I'm going to take us off-road," he said quickly. "Hold on." Before she could respond, Alex turned the wheel hard to the left, sending the car off the paved road and onto a rough dirt path. The car bounced violently as they sped over uneven ground, the headlights behind them flickering in the distance. Maria's heart leaped into her throat as the car jolted again, but she gripped the seat tighter, her knuckles white. "Alex, this is crazy." "We don't have a choice," he replied, his voice sharp with adrenaline. "We're almost there. We just need to shake them for a few more minutes." The car raced through the dirt path, its tires kicking up dust as they barreled through the night. The sound of the other car's engine was growing distant now, but Maria knew it wouldn't be long before the Wilsons found another way to catch up. Then, ahead, she saw it, the dim light of the safe house. It was just around the corner, hidden from the main road. Alex's eyes locked on it, his grip tightening on the wheel as he swerved once more, narrowly avoiding a tree branch that reached out into their path. "We're almost there," he muttered. "Just hang on." Maria's pulse surged with a final burst of hope. They were going to make it. They had to. But just as they rounded the corner, a blinding flash of headlights filled the rearview mirror and the sound of screeching tires came from behind them. Maria gasped. It was them. The Wilsons had found them again. "No, no, no!" Alex cursed under his breath as he slammed the accelerator to the floor. The final stretch was a blur speeding toward the safe house, the engine roaring in her ears, the headlights of the car behind them closing in. But as they approached the gate, Maria could see the silhouette of the safe house up ahead. They were almost there, and then, as the gates of the safe house loomed ahead, the last thing Maria saw was the unmistakable shape of another car cutting them off at the last second. No escape. Maria's heart stopped as the headlights of the pursuing car flared blindingly in the rearview mirror. They were close now, too close. Every instinct in her body screamed for them to break away, to somehow find a way to escape, but there was no longer a clear path forward. The safe house was right ahead, but the gate, the final barrier to safety, was too far, too close to be reached without a fight. Alex's knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel, his eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror. The car behind them was gaining fast, its headlights nearly blinding them. They were closing in, and Maria could feel the world around her narrowing. There was no time to second guess, no time to hesitate. "They're going to block us off," Maria said, her voice tight with fear. "We're not going to make it." Alex didn't answer at first. He swerved the car to the right, then quickly jerked it left, trying to lose the car behind them. But it was no use. The other vehicle was too close, too determined. The sound of their tires screeching on the dirt path was deafening. "We have to push through." Alex gritted through clenched teeth, his eyes steely with resolve. "We're not stopping now." Maria held her breath, her heart slamming in her chest. She looked out of the side window and saw the dark, looming figure of the safe house gate ahead. They were almost there. They just needed to make it a little further. But then the car behind them accelerated once more, pulling up alongside them. Maria's breath caught in her throat as she saw the figure in the driver's seat, a shadowy figure, too indistinct to be fully seen, but their intentions were clear. The car was positioned in a way that could force them off course if Alex didn't act fast. "Alex!" Maria began, but before she could finish her sentence, the car behind them lurched forward, its bumper grazing the rear of their car, pushing them toward the edge of the road. "No!" Alex slammed his foot on the brake, but it wasn't enough. The force of the impact sent their car spinning to the left, throwing Maria against the side of the door as Alex fought to regain control. The world tilted as they skidded off the path, the tires digging into the dirt and gravel. Alex fought the steering wheel, desperately trying to straighten the car. For a moment, everything was a blur. Lights flashing, dust swirling in the air, the deafening roar of the engine and the screech of tires. Maria's heart pounded, the sensation of falling out of control overwhelming her. Finally, Alex managed to regain control, but they had veered off the road completely, heading straight for the trees that lined the path. With a swift turn of the wheel, Alex yanked them back onto the dirt road, but they were no longer headed toward the gate. The other car was now right behind them, its headlights blinding, its engine revving as it prepared to finish the job. Maria's eyes flicked back to the gate. It was so close. They had come so far. "We're not going to make it," Maria gasped, panic rising in her chest. Her fingers curled around the seat, her pulse racing. Alex's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed with determination. "Yes, we will," he said fiercely. "Hold on." He floored the accelerator once more, pushing the car into the final stretch. The sound of the engine roaring to life filled Maria's ears, but it wasn't enough. The car behind them kept pace, relentless, its headlights consuming them. Maria's stomach twisted. They needed to break free now. The safe house gate was only a few hundred feet away, but Maria could hear the tires of the other car getting closer. She could practically feel the pressure, the sense of doom weighing down on her. "Now!" Alex shouted, his grip tightening on the wheel. He swerved the car sharply to the left, heading straight for a gap in the trees beside the road. The gap wasn't wide enough to fit a full car, but Alex had no choice. If he didn't make it, they were done for. For a moment, Maria held her breath as the car squeezed through the gap, its tires scraping against the tree branches. The branches scraped the side of the car, but they made it through. "Go, go, go!" Maria shouted, her heart hammering as Alex sped through the narrow opening. The other car, unable to follow, skidded to a halt, the tires screeching in protest as it tried to avoid the trees. Alex didn't look back. He kept his eyes focused on the path ahead, pushing the car even harder, trying to put as much distance as possible between them and the threat behind them. The ground beneath them rumbled, the rough path making the ride a chaotic, teeth-jarring experience. But they had to keep going. "There's a small cabin up ahead," Alex said through clenched teeth. "We'll make it there. We'll hide out until we can get help." Maria barely registered the words. The only thing that mattered was getting away, putting as much distance as possible between them and the people hunting them. They veered off the dirt path and onto a smaller trail. The trees were thick around them now, and the shadows seemed to swallow them whole. For a moment, the car's headlights were the only light in the darkness, casting eerie reflections on the trees. Maria's heart was still pounding, her body still tense with the memory of the chase. Alex pushed the car harder, the engine growling as they powered through the trail. The cabin wasn't far, just a small, hidden retreat that Alex had kept as a safe place. If they could get there, they might have a chance, but they weren't out of the woods yet. Maria glanced back over her shoulder, the dark silhouette of the car behind them slowly fading into the distance. Were they still being followed? Had the Wilsons given up? She couldn't tell. The trees began to thin, and soon they were approaching a small clearing. There, nestled among the trees, was the cabin. Alex's face softened for a moment as he saw the structure coming into view, but his eyes remained cautious, scanning the area for any signs of pursuit. As they pulled up to the cabin, Alex slammed the car into park. They both froze for a moment, listening, waiting. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees, the world around them still and quiet. "Do you think we lost them?" Maria asked, her voice shaky but hopeful. "I don't know," Alex replied, his voice low. "But we have to act like we haven't." They quickly exited the car, moving toward the cabin's door. Alex unlocked it, and they slipped inside, locking it behind them. The interior was dimly lit, but it had everything they needed: shelter, security, and time to plan. For now, they were safe. But Maria knew it wouldn't last. They were still running from a shadow, and the Wilsons weren't going to let them rest for long. But at least here, they had a moment to breathe. Alex turned to her, his face still tense. "We've got one shot at this, Maria. We can't let them find us again." Maria nodded, determination flooding her chest. "Then we do it, no matter what it takes." They had come too far to stop now. The fight wasn't over yet. It was just beginning. Part 15. The Tipping Point. The cabin was small, tucked away in a secluded corner of the forest, and for the first time in hours, Maria could breathe. The constant adrenaline, the fear, the chase, it all seemed to stop the moment the door clicked shut behind them. The world outside was muffled, distant, like they had found a brief, fleeting moment of peace in an otherwise chaotic storm. But Maria knew, deep down, that it wouldn't last. It never did. Alex stood near the door, his back rigid, his eyes scanning the dark corners of the room, listening for any sound that might break the fragile quiet they had found. His brow was furrowed, the exhaustion evident in his posture, but there was something else in his eyes, a fire, a resolve that hadn't faltered, even when things had looked impossible. He turned to her, his voice low but steady. "We're safe here for now," he said, almost as if reassuring himself more than her. "But we can't stay long. The Wilsons know we're on their trail now. They'll be looking for us everywhere." Maria nodded, though the weight of what had just happened hung heavy on her chest. The truth they had uncovered about the Wilsons was monumental. But the deeper they got into it, the more dangerous it became. Now they were being hunted not just by a powerful family, but by an entire network of people who had the means and the will to do whatever it took to silence them. The files, the documents, the damning evidence, they were in the right hands now. But Maria couldn't help but feel a sense of dread settle in her bones. They hadn't exposed the full extent of the Wilsons' corruption yet. They couldn't. The truth needed to be in the right hands, someone who could make it public, someone who had the power to bring it to light without getting themselves buried under the weight of the Wilsons' influence. They still had a long way to go. "What's the next move?" Maria asked, her voice steady but filled with quiet urgency. Alex's eyes flicked to the bag of documents they had managed to bring with them. It was still there, resting on the table, like the lifeline they'd been holding on to in a world that had turned upside down. "We need to get this into the hands of the right people," Alex said, his voice tight. "Noah, he'll know what to do. He can get it to the press, the authorities, anyone who can take this down. But we can't just walk out there and hand it to him. We need to move carefully. The last thing we want is for the Wilsons to get to him before we do." Maria glanced at the bag again, her stomach turning at the thought of the damage the Wilsons could cause if they got their hands on it. They had to stay ahead of them. But how? "The authorities," Maria began, her voice trailing off. She had thought about this 1,000 times since they had started this journey. The Wilsons had their hands in everything: businesses, governments, law enforcement. Could they even trust the police to do anything about it? Would they be corrupted too? Alex met her gaze, as if he'd read her mind. "I'm not sure the authorities are the way to go. Not yet, at least. We can't risk them intercepting it. If we're going to do this, it has to be fast. We have one chance, and if it doesn't work, the Wilsons will have us erased, and all of this, the truth, will disappear." Maria felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Alex was right. They couldn't afford to waste time. There was no time to hesitate, no time to wonder if they could really trust anyone. If they didn't act quickly, it would be over before it had even begun. "Where's Noah?" Maria asked, her voice firm despite the fear twisting in her gut. "He's close," Alex replied. "I can contact him, but we need to be sure that we're not being followed. The Wilsons have eyes everywhere, and Noah could be at risk just by meeting us." Maria nodded. She didn't like it, but she understood. They had to keep their movements hidden. Every step, every decision had to be calculated. If they weren't careful, it would all unravel. Alex picked up his phone and dialed a number, his fingers tapping the screen with practiced precision. Maria watched him closely, her mind spinning. If the Wilsons had people everywhere, if they were already tracking their every move, what were the chances that Noah wouldn't be compromised? But there was no turning back now. The clock was ticking. The phone rang 3 times before someone picked up. "Alex?" The voice on the other end was low and rough, as if the person had been awake for days. "What's going on? I thought you were dead." Alex exhaled sharply, relieved but guarded. "I'm not dead, but we're not in the clear. We have the evidence, Noah. The Wilsons aren't going to stop until they silence us, and they'll use anyone to do it. We need your help, now." There was a long pause on the other end, and Maria could hear a faint rustling as Noah seemed to think through the situation. "I've been expecting you," Noah finally said, his voice steady but with an edge of tension. "The Wilsons have known for a while that you were getting too close. They won't stop. You can't come to me, Alex. You'll lead them straight to me." Alex ran a hand through his hair, frustration creeping into his voice. "We don't have any other options. The documents are here with us, and we need to get them to the right people. If we wait any longer, we lose our shot. You have connections, people who can help. You know how this works." Noah was silent for a moment, and Maria could almost feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. "I'll meet you," he said finally, "but we have to be careful. I'll set up a place where no one can trace us. We're not out of the woods yet, and if we're not careful, you'll all be dead before the truth ever reaches the world." Maria's heart skipped a beat. The gravity of Noah's words sank in. They weren't just fighting a corrupt family anymore, they were up against a global network, one that could silence anyone who stood in their way. The fight for the truth was bigger than she had ever imagined. Alex ended the call, his eyes scanning the room once more before he turned back to Maria. "Noah's setting up a meeting point. We have to be there in a few hours, and we have to be careful. They know we're alive, and they won't let us go easily. We'll take the back roads. Stay quiet, stay low, and don't make any noise. If we're followed, we have to cut them off, no hesitation." Maria's mind was spinning. There was no more running. This was it, the point of no return. She nodded, feeling the weight of everything settle in her chest. "Let's go," she said, her voice calm despite the storm inside her. "Let's finish this." Alex grabbed the bag with the documents, securing it tightly. The door opened and they slipped out into the night, moving quickly and silently. They had one chance. The truth had to get out no matter the cost. In a world where power and influence often overshadow truth, the story highlights the importance of standing up against corruption, no matter the cost. It teaches us that the pursuit of justice is not always easy, and the road to exposing the truth can be fraught with danger and uncertainty. But it also emphasizes the power of courage, resilience, and determination. Even when faced with seemingly insurmountable odds, those who fight for what is right can make a difference. The story shows that the truth, when revealed, has the power to bring about change, but it also requires sacrifice, trust, and strategic thinking. Just as the characters in the story push forward, we too must embrace the challenges in our lives, armed with the conviction that standing up for what's right is always worth the effort. In a society where deceit often reigns, it's essential to stay true to our principles and fight for transparency, fairness, and integrity, because in the end, it's those who refuse to be silenced who have the power to shape a better world. As the night falls and the dust settles, remember that no matter how overwhelming life may seem, there's always a way forward. Sometimes, the hardest paths lead to the most beautiful endings. Whether you're facing challenges or unexpected twists in your own journey, trust that with courage and perseverance, you can navigate through it. This story, while intense and filled with drama, also serves as a reminder that there's always hope, no matter how lost or uncertain things may feel. And just like the characters, you too have the strength to face the unknown. Before you go, don't forget to hit like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the Stories TH channel for more heartwarming, edge-of-your-seat stories. Drop a comment below to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to hear from you. Take care, and remember, the toughest moments are often the ones that lead to the most powerful transformations. Keep moving forward, and let's meet here again soon for another story.